All right, good morning. We're all here today to research and just kind of talk through as a collaborative team on how to support students in Tier 1 instruction. I think any of this information is going to be good for all kids because we know there really is no typical learner these days, but especially those students that are identified with a disability and need additional support. So I'm going to start off the talk with reading. We're going to kind of go through some reading strategies and math. And so Ms. Stovall, could you start by really telling us, if let's say I'm starting a module, which I think we are starting a module here very soon, what would be the best route you could recommend for a teacher to start in the planning phase of what to do and how to best introduce this new module?
Okay, we're going to talk more about expeditionary learning today. Wit and Wisdom kind of breaks it down a little bit easier for them, so we'll kind of talk grades 3 through 8 especially. So if I'm starting a new module, the first thing I want to do is I want to look at the texts that are involved in that, and I need to know the Lexile level of each one of those texts. So you can Google and get all kinds of little ranges that let you know. So I want to know the Lexile level of that text and whether it's grade appropriate, is it easier, or is it above grade level. I also need to know the individual students' STAR reading level. So you can pull that off the STAR reading report. If for some reason a special ed teacher doesn't have access, they should be able to ask the gen ed teacher and get it. So then I need to compare the two levels. So if the text that's being used in expeditionary learning is above that student's reading ability, I'm going to have some scaffolding in there. I can't just hand them that book and expect them to just read it because they can't. Sometimes they are below grade level. Like right now I have a 5th grade module in front of me, and the promise is to keep book about Jackie Robinson. It's a 5th grade module, but the book is really on a 3rd grade reading level. So for most of our students, that should be a fairly easy read, but once again, it's a case-by-case kind of thing. So once I know the text, the student's reading ability, and how much support or lack of support I'm going to need to give there, that's step 1. Once I get into the actual module and I'm looking all of that, I kind of have to dissect between, we only have one standard that talks about reading on grade level. And so we'll talk about that in a few minutes about where to address that. All of those other reading, writing, all of those other standards say nothing about the text being on that grade level. It's great if it can be on that grade level, but sometimes it can't. So if we're doing a book that is above grade level, then I can provide all the support I need for that student in the reading of that text to help them with the actual task and the writing. So once I kind of know what I'm doing with reading, when I actually get into the module and you're using your purple workbooks, these are the graphic organizers that they will use to finally get to the writing piece. But they're not meant to be just independent, hey, go fill this out, read something, and answer some questions. When you look at the lesson that goes with this one, it truly is question by question. Teacher asks a question, students respond. They're even in groups. So I'm not sitting here alone trying to figure this out. I've seen one of our amazing teachers who she is modeling this on the document camera. So whatever they're supposed to write is being written here. All of these are the tools they're going to eventually need when they do their independent writing. So the better we do here, the more efficient they're going to be when they get to the writing. I suggested to Ann earlier that every student needs to fill this out, whether I'm a strong student or a struggling student. But if I'm a struggling student, once I've done this experience and I'm getting ready for the writing phase of this, what harm would there be in you giving me the graphic organizer of a student who's extremely strong? I have mine, I've done the work, but I now have theirs also, because at that point I'm trying to find the evidence. And so I have another tool to use. So I think that so you just have to take it bit by bit, but it's really important that the teacher reads the guide, and it's never intended to be just independent practice. It really does have to be bit by bit. So having the special ed teacher spend most of their time trying to do this is probably not the most efficient use of that time, because and like I asked you earlier, who's going to help close this reading deficit if the special ed teacher is spending all of her time trying to get a graphic organizer completed that could have been completed in class with partners or an example?
Right. Yes, and I totally agree with that, because most of our time should be spent trying to close that gap wherever their deficit is. And I think that those are great strategies. One of the thoughts that I had as you were speaking is if it was a text that was a little above where the child was reading at, that possibly having it what am I thinking, audio tape for them so that they could hear it as they're trying to go through the passage over and over again. I know one student that helped a great deal that when we had mentioned that. As well as with the writing, after they've got both of those beautiful graphic organizers, if they still needed a little bit more assistance, possibly in the resource list we sent home, there are some writing frames and also sentence starters that could help with students that we could then fade out. And I think the most important thing is the special ed teacher and the general ed teacher are working together, because we are closing that gap, but we have to make connections back to what's happening in general ed. So a little time when they come into the room and a little time when they are leaving the room or in a co-teaching, that we're spending connecting what they're learning back to what is being taught in Tier 1 instruction.
That sounds great.
So that would mean definitely not teaching expeditionary and learning, like you were talking about the graphic organizer in special ed time, but concentrating on, do I need to pre-teach some vocabulary? Do we need to talk about sentence starters, but just making those connections? But the main piece of special ed intervention should be focused on that individual deficit. I also love what you talked about really having the purpose of the assessment, the purpose of the assignment. If we are not working on that one standard, really being purposeful, and the text that we choose for students is going to make all of our kids more successful. And that's really that scaffolding and differentiation that we all strive for to make our students successful. Well, we're going to switch gears a little bit. Does anybody have anything else to say about ELA or writing? I know this isn't the last conversation we're going to have, and we're going to try to do these maybe once every couple of months, once a month. We'll see how it goes and where the support's needed. But we're going to switch gears and talk about
I think a lot of times the biggest support that students can have is being allowed to do it in a way that they're able to do it and not always following the exact procedures that I'm showing you on the board. Because I think a lot of our struggling learners, the biggest thing that they have trouble with is memorizing steps. And if they really understand the underlying mathematical ideas, then a lot of times they're better able to attach meaning to those steps and they're able to access them later in the right context. So really just listening, allowing them to explore on their own, and then refining that throughout the task. So in Eureka, they present so many problems in every lesson, and sometimes teachers feel like they have to fill out this whole entire workbook. But we know that it's probably a lot, it's more beneficial or worth your time to spend a lot of time on a quality problem that you've picked out, maybe the best one in the whole lesson. And spend a lot of time on it and go through the different layers and let the kids kind of work it on their own and make connections between what I'm doing and what you're doing. And a lot of times the kids interacting together in really not an ability group to group, but a variety of abilities in one group would elicit a lot more student thinking. And a lot of times they can exchange ideas and work together instead of the teacher, trying to do all the work for the students. And then they're able to own that.
I know a lot of students struggle too with the vocabulary of Eureka. So I know that's a support also that could come from special ed time. But
So all of the teachers in Germantown, when we were together 2 summers ago, we all agreed to use the common language that's set in Eureka so that kids aren't having to learn a new language every year. Because before, when we had other resources were pulling things from everywhere, teachers were using, it was like a new foreign language every time you stepped into the classroom. So I think for the general education teachers and the special ed teachers to all use that same language, then students aren't having to think of, that it's one term is 2 different terms, or that one idea is a different idea because maybe you're using crocodiles for greater than, less than, and then someone's using the right mathematical language. So we're really trying to stick with the precise language, which is actually Math Practice 6, that all students have to, they should be engaging in this in all the classes. But we did agree on that, and I think sometimes for special ed teachers, if they're not in the Tier 1 classroom, it might be hard, to know all of those terms. So it really is important to research the grade level and talk to the gen ed teacher and make sure that we are on the same ground on language.
I think co-planning is a big plus when it comes to that, because what I love, I think that's a little bit, I don't want to use the term easier, but I think the supportive bridges, when we were first trying to find what's going to be a great intervention tool that will help support that Eureka or any deficits with math skills that the student is needed. So we have the resources, just making sure, are we really paired up with the general ed instruction and teacher, and are we talking, and if we're working on this area and this is happening in SPED, that there is again that connection being made, and that it's communicated, hey, kid's doing great here, but I see that he still doesn't know these pieces. Well, the special ed teacher being able to say, well, look where we're coming along with intervention, so that they both feel like that they are successfully working towards.
And I think that goes back to something else we heard during our PLC meetings. Sometimes it's not just the content that our kids struggle with, but actually the motivation and drive because they are behind. So part of too, I think, is helping kids self-monitor in our resource list. There are some self-monitoring sheets that could be shared between the general ed and the special ed teacher, that a child is actually saying, hey, this is where I am, but gosh, look at where I've already come, and just to keep them self-motivated for things that they might perceive as being pretty challenging for them. It's going back to some of the Eureka and some other things that we kind of found when we're going around or found to be successful for children, is sometimes just reminding them what they really are trying to answer. There might be multiple pieces, and so just even visually structuring the sheet of paper or the whiteboard as to 1 and 2, like I have this part of the question and the second part, just to remind them that they need to finish. So just visually organizing things, I think, are very, very helpful for some of our kids.
And I believe the scaffolds are pretty laid out and built into Eureka as well.
They are.
Well, I think if I were a teacher, I probably would hit stop at this point, because we've got lots of things to do. So we're going to end our time for today and continued support. But the big takeaway that I want everyone to hear is that we are all working together as a team, and hopefully that is also going on in each school building. But if PLCs are struggling or different grade levels need assistance, that we are available as teams to come out and provide individual support, because we certainly can't answer every question the right answer is going to be the right answer for any kid. So thank y'all for all being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.